Okay. Mic check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K Collector, and this video is long overdue. We are over 2 months into 2025, and a lot of people are asking, what is the climate when it comes to video game collecting, retro game collecting? What's out there? Are there places that we can still source retro games? Can we find them? Is it real? Is it not real? What is real? And so I think it's a very interesting time, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is just the overall climate for video game collecting, and also the backdrop of that, how YouTube plays into that, and the impact of YouTube in video game collecting and retro game collecting now in 2025. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of the hype, the speculative hype, the hype that we saw a lot of, right, during the 2020, 2021, 2022, and maybe even just like the first 3 months of 2023, a lot of that hype that we saw is gone. It's been extracted. Not as many casual gamers care anymore, right? They're not frequenting the retro shops anymore. They're not, jumping all over, retro games anymore, because retro games are not the fad. You know what the fad is today? Pokemon. That's right. Pokemon cards are the rage right now. Pokemon cards today are what retro games were about 4 years ago. And I'm talking strictly from the speculative space. There were a lot of young people, a lot of younger people, younger generations that got really into the retro gaming scene. And I think that's in large part what helped to propel the hobby, right? Because you had, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and even younger wanting to actually play Nintendo games and Super Nintendo games. And it was because they were consuming so much of that content, right? And I also, obviously, there was a financial component. Obviously, when everyone dives headfirst into one particular hobby, you immediately see like this gold rush effect, where people are not only enamored by the item itself, but they're also enamored by all the hype around it and how much that hype can contribute to some type of financial gain, to how much that hype can inflate the price of these items and increase the desirability and make a lot of people want these items. And I think, that was a huge contributor, especially those first few years after 2020. That played a big role into it. And I think, now what we're seeing kind of like the tide go back out on that. And like I said, everyone is really focused on Pokemon. Pokemon is all the rage. And in fact, earlier this year, I remember going to the supermarket one morning. I went to go get some eggs, and I remember there being a huge line for GameStop. And it was a very odd thing, because this wasn't like a weekend. I think this happened to be like a Thursday or something, or Friday. And I just remember seeing this long line in front of GameStop, and it was really cold. Like, it was really cold. It had been like 4 degrees that day. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what is everyone lining up in front of GameStop for? Like, why is everyone waiting out here? And I remember I didn't take the time, honestly, to go find out, because it was just way too cold. But later on that day, when I had to go back out to run some errands, I happened to go inside GameStop because they were open at this point. And I asked the employee, I said, hey, were you guys giving something away today, or did a new game come out that I'm not aware of? And they were like, no. But a new Pokemon pack came out, and it was this new version of Pokemon cards. I don't know what it's called, because I'm not into Pokemon cards, but I guess this new Pokemon card craze started, and this massive line was there. And then I go home and I look on social media, and I see that there's grown adults fighting in a Costco for Pokemon cards. And I said, okay, this explains where all of the attention went. This explains where all of the speculative hobbyists went, right? They left retro gaming, and now they're on Pokemon cards, and I guess there's even more money to be made in Pokemon cards than retro games, because people are actually fighting for these things. And so, I think that's just the way things are. Whenever there's a fad about something, those things tend to kind of take off. Now, the unique thing about Pokemon cards or video games, I think that there's always going to be some type of intrinsic value in those hobbies. There's always going to be people who are very into those hobbies of the trading cards and of the video games. But with video games in particular, I've said this before, we didn't see a crash. We haven't seen the retro gaming market crash, because video games still have like an intrinsic value, in my opinion, even more so than Pokemon cards, because at the end of the day, aside from a video game's value, you can still put that video game into a console and play it, and if it's a good game, it's going to give you hours and hours of entertainment. When it comes to a Pokemon card, you're not going to battle yourself, right? In Pokemon cards, I've always said that before, like, Pokemon cards are great, but I don't think there's as much utility in Pokemon cards as there is in video games, because you can always play a video game, especially if it's an amazing one-player game or a single campaign or like an RPG or something like that. There's always gonna be that option for you to actually play and use the video game outside of what it's worth. And I think because of that, we haven't seen a crash in the retro gaming market. In fact, in some cases, some games have actually gone up, and I think this has been a bit discouraging for those looking to enter into the hobby. Now, some people might say that there's some gatekeeping going on in here. I really try my best to stay away from like the drama when it comes to the gaming community. I'm a collector, so I like to talk about the games that I like to collect, and I like to, kind of talk a little bit about some of the games that I'm playing. But I think it is a little bit more difficult to get into retro gaming and video gaming, because I would say retro gaming probably more so than video gaming in general, because there's such a finite amount of retro games. They're going to keep on making Pokemon cards. They're going to keep coming out with packs, and you're going to get a new pack of this and a new pack of that, but you're not getting brand new palettes stacked with Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. You're not getting new palettes stacked with Ghouls and Ghosts for the Sega Genesis. You have to go out and hunt and seek those things. And so there's a different type of competition for retro games than there is with Pokemon cards. I feel like the battle or the war that goes on in trying to acquire retro games is almost like this guerrilla warfare style. You have to time when you go to the flea markets, and time when you go to your mom and pop shops. You have to time your yard sales, right? You got to be one step ahead of the game. You got to be quick with Facebook Marketplace. You got to have your messenger ready. There's all these little tips and tricks and things that you have to do to stay ahead of the competition in order to get the best deals. And I just don't think a lot of people have patience for that. And I think that's another big part of the reason why people are kind of moving away from it. But it's still a great hobby. I love it. I have not been picking up as much, but I think it's still great. And even if you don't have a huge library, just the games that you have, just playing the games that you have is enough to have a lot of hours of enjoyment. Now, YouTube and YouTubers have definitely played a role. Back in 2020, 2021, there were a ton, and I've said this before, there were so many gaming YouTubers, a ton of YouTube content. A lot of it honestly was centered around reselling, to be quite honest. We know that different YouTubers who have now grown to the hundreds of thousands of subscribers, you had some real pioneers in this video game or retro video game reselling space. We saw a lot of that, and so we saw a lot of copycat type of channels pop up, of people trying to do the same thing, and that kind of still helped to push a lot of that. But a lot of those channels have died off, and I think a lot of them died off along with the hype. I don't think the pool of buyers is as large, and like anything else, if you don't have the systems in place to stay competitive with some of the bigger resellers, and we all know who they are, if you don't have the systems and the tools and the networks in place to keep up with those folks, trying to do it at that level is going to be a daunting task. And I think because of that, a lot of channels have really kind of faded into the dust. You still have a lot of channels, a lot of collector channels, which I like to follow, a lot of channels that still showcase their pickups, which I think is great because you're always learning about new games that are out there. You still have those channels, but even those channels are starting to lose a little bit of their luster. I think, you know, for a lot of folks, they are starting to lose interest in the pickups videos, and I don't care. I'll still showcase, you know, the games that I pick up, although I don't pick up as many games as I used to pick up. When I do get a pickup, I am going to showcase it, but my channel's been kind of leaning more towards talking about the balance between gaming and living actual life and things like that. And that's one of the areas that I typically tend to I always try to incorporate that somewhere in some of my videos, just to make sure that my subscribers are keeping a balanced and level head when it comes to this game collecting hobby. I've gotten comments with people saying that they've felt like, you know, their collecting is getting out of control, and they felt like, you know, my channel in some ways influenced them to buy games that they didn't have. And that's not what it's about. You know, it's about family time. It's about building your future, working on your career, working on yourself, working on your health. If you're not healthy, hitting the gym, eating right, you know, staying balanced, reading a book, staying sharp. Those are all the things that I think will just enhance, you know, your collecting hobby, and really that the hobby should be a way for you to kind of take a breath and decompress and woosah before you get back out there and keep on grinding towards your real goals in life. Because life goals are not about having a wall of games, they're about having just a successful life with good relationships and healthy living. So I mean, I think with where we're at right now in 2025 with retro gaming, I think people are settling into their own collections. They're locked in with what they want and what they have. And I think people are becoming more comfortable with saying, you know, I want that, but I don't want that. And I think with that mindset, it's allowing people to be more level-headed, and the hype is kind of dying down. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think about the current retro gaming market. I'm interested to know. But that does it for me. It's the Y2K Collector. Sorry it took so long for me to put this together for you guys. It's just been one hell of a year. But more to come, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.